Ladies and gentlemen, our program will be commencing shortly. We invite you now to take your seats in the ballroom and switch your communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you. السيدات والسادة الحضور، سيبدأ البرنامج بعد قليل. نرجو من حضراتكم التكرم بأخذ مقاعدكم في القاعة وإغلاق جميع أجهزة الاتصال أو تحويلها إلى وضع الصامت. وشكراً. May we invite all delegates with white badges to please take your seats in the ballroom. We kindly ask Operations Support Officers with green badges not to disrupt the proceedings. For accompanying officials, red badges, we invite you to please move to the El Ghazal 3 Hall or the Delegate Lounge in the Grand Foyer to view the proceedings at this time. Thank you. على جميع المشاركين حاملي الشارة البيضاء التوجه إلى مقاعدهم في قاعة النور. نرجو من حاملي الشارة الخضراء عدم عرقلة مجريات المؤتمر. بإمكان مرافقي الوفود حاملي الشارة الحمراء متابعة الجلسات عبر شاشات العرض المتاحة في قاعة الغزال 3 أو في البهو الكبير. وشكراً. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will be commencing shortly. We invite you now to take your seats in the ballroom and switch your communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you. السيدات والسادة الحضور، سيبدأ البرنامج بعد قليل. نرجو من حضراتكم التكرم بأخذ مقاعدكم في القاعة وإغلاق جميع أجهزة الاتصال أو تحويلها إلى وضع الصامت. وشكراً. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will be commencing shortly. We invite you now to take your seats in the ballroom and switch your communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you. السيدات والسادة الحضور، سيبدأ البرنامج بعد قليل. نرجو من حضراتكم التكرم بأخذ مقاعدكم في القاعة وإغلاق جميع أجهزة الاتصال أو تحويلها إلى وضع الصامت. وشكراً. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will be commencing shortly. We invite you now to take your seats in the ballroom and switch your communication devices to the silent mode. Thank you. السيدات والسادة الحضور، سيبدأ البرنامج بعد قليل. نرجو من حضراتكم التكرم بأخذ مقاعدكم في القاعة وإغلاق جميع أجهزة الاتصال أو تحويلها إلى وضع الصامت. وشكراً.
Your Excellencies, dear delegates, may I invite you to take your seats as we are about to begin our third plenary session on the geopolitics of energy, technology, trade, and power. I hope you all enjoyed a good lunch and were able to continue the conversations that will no doubt have been inspired by the morning sessions of the 21st IISS Manama dialogue. Energy, as we have already discussed this morning, remains central to global political and geoeconomic dynamics. It is, of course, also a major factor here in the Middle East, in the region. We have already touched upon the rise of the United States as an energy exporter, changing dynamics among OPEC Plus members. We have begun to discuss new ambitions centered on gas and renewable energy and new patterns of global trade that are shaping the thinking across the globe. So this session will look at ambitions and strategies of a number of countries and international organizations as well, and the place of technology and trade within the broader theme of statecraft. Brief reminder that all plenary sessions are on the record. If you would like to ask a question, make an intervention, remember that it involves a short two-step process on your part. Insert your delegate badge into your microphone unit and press the speaker button, and then you will be in the queue of those seeking the floor, and I will get to as many of you as I can. So let us now turn to our wonderful panel, and they will speak in the order that is listed in the program. We have Jan Lipavsky, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. We have Ruben Brekelmans, the Minister of Defense of the Netherlands. And we have the Honorable James Danley, the Deputy Secretary of Energy of the United States. And we have Osama Mubarak, the Secretary General of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. And Minister Lipavsky, may I invite you to take the floor? It's good to see you after we've seen each other in Prague a few weeks ago. Welcome to the Manama Dialogue.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for a warm welcome. It's a great pleasure to be with you today in Manama. I would like to thank the Bahrain for warm hospitality, to Minister Zayavi, and I have to begin with a simple statement that this region, with its vast resources, has shaped global energy dynamics for decades. It is a particularly fitting place, therefore, to reflect on our topic in the evolving geopolitics of energy. And allow me to dedicate this speech to few remarks on lessons learned from a central European perspective. For many years, mainstream thinking on the continent in Europe was that we treated energy as a mere market commodity. Now we know that this view no longer holds. Since 2022, Europe has undergone a profound awakening to the nexus between energy and security. Yielding to its neo-imperialistic impulses, the Russian Empire revealed its true nature. It weaponized nearly everything in an increasingly open hybrid war against Europe. Energy was among its first instruments of choice, exploiting our deep dependence on Russian energy supplies. Political optimism, strategic short-sightedness, economic interest, and persistent Russian lobbying reinforced by energy infrastructure connections placed Europe in a position of vulnerability. We became energy hostages. Russia turned energy pipelines into chains. But every form of dependency can be overcome, provided it is recognized as such. Of course, it requires resolve and sacrifice. On the day of Russia's invasion in February 22, my government began work on cutting us free from Russian energy imports. In oil, we broke our reliance on the Druzhba pipeline. We financed the reinforcement of the Transalpine pipeline. In short, it's known as TAL. It goes from Italy to Austria to Germany and then connects to Czechia. It now delivers up to 8 million tons of crude oil annually to Czechia from the Italian port of Terste, and since TAL completion earlier this year, we have not imported a single drop of Russian oil. We applied the same approach to natural gas. At the beginning of 2023, we ended our 98% dependence on Russian deliveries. We joined the investors in the first post-invasion LNG regasification terminal in Eemshaven, in Netherlands. It has since transferred approximately 16 billion cubic meters of LNG into European gas network. We also now have similar deals with German LNG ports. and 1/3 of this amount was US LNG for Czechia. So today our reliance on Russian gas is near zero. We are also diversifying nuclear fuel supplies for our Soviet-designed VVER reactors at the Temelín and Dukovany power plants. A few months ago, we received our first deliveries from American Westinghouse. In parallel, we are exploring other reliable suppliers, including France, to secure our needs. Western companies exited this business in the 90s, leaving the field to Russia under the assumption that it would remain a reliable partner. Why do I share these stories? Why do I share this example of Czechia? Because the Czech experience offers a case study in how a landlocked country can overcome a geographic constraints and transform its energy mix in response to geopolitical risks. Unfortunately, some EU member states had not yet cut themselves off from Russian oil and gas. Otherwise, they continue to weaken all of us. This is why I welcome President Trump's push to reduce fossil fuel imports from Russia into Europe. And I will be very specific. Hungary and Slovakia point to geographically as a constraint. They are basically Czech neighbors. The same geography applies. But that argument does not hold. We manage and show the way. Being landlocked doesn't mean being confined and without options. Budapest and Bratislava have credible alternatives to Russian supplies. For example, Croatia has offered Hungary oil via the Adria pipeline, while Prime Minister Orbán points to technical issues. Perhaps, but they can be resolved in the same manner and same way as we had challenges with TAL pipeline. And other shareholders were initially hesitant to escape the capacity, but we invested in upgrading the pipeline, retrofitting pumps and infrastructure. Same for Slovakia. It is connected to all its neighbors with gas flowing from Austria, Czechia, Hungary, Poland and Ukraine. So from our side, I can also confirm that Czech gas infrastructure has sufficient capacity to meet Slovakia's need. And my message to those who continue to rely on energy is clear. On Russian energy is clear. You have an alternative. Moscow is not a reliable partner. In the end, you will pay far more than you appear to save now. And beyond our immediate neighborhood, the Czech experience offers also the following lessons for the broader international community. Firstly, diversification is essential. Relying on a single supplier, especially one willing to weaponize energy, is an unacceptable risk. Secondly, strategic infrastructure matters. Investments in pipelines, terminals and interconnectors are not just economic, they are strategic assets that shape national security. And thirdly, solidarity is a strength. The EU's coordinated response to the energy crisis demonstrated the power of unity. Together we secured supplies, stabilized markets, supported vulnerable populations and pushed back against Russia. In this context, I want to highlight the recent adopted 19 EU sanctions package, which targets the energy sector, particularly liquefied natural gas, LNG. So, let me conclude by stressing that Moscow weaponization of energy is not a just European problem. A destabilized world is not the Middle East interest. Therefore, a more coordinated approach among global energy players, many of whom are gathered here in Manama, is needed. We all understand the Middle East's leverage over global energy prices, so please keep in mind the less Russian heirs from oil, the harder it becomes for Kremlin to sustain its war machine. Without security, there is no prosperity. Europe and the Middle East should build an energy partnership based on stability, investment and predictability. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Minister Lipavsky, thank you very much for those remarks and for outlining the journey that Czech Republic has been on to transform its energy mix. I think that call for partnership, will be picked up, I imagine, by many to see how we can make that a reality. Minister Brekelmans, over to you.
Thank you very much. You might wonder, why is the Minister of Defense talking about energy? And the answer is very simple. Because energy policy nowadays is security policy. I would even say that energy policy nowadays is defense policy. Because what we face in Europe, the biggest military threat is Russia. And Russia and Russia's war machine is fully funded by energy resources. What we also see is that the interdependence or the dependence on energy resources is used as a weapon. And it's used full-fledged as a way to put pressure on others. Same is true for the access to critical resources and to raw earth materials. It is not only an economic tool, it is a military and a security tool. I would like to mention 3 particular points. One is that we need to do much more work to integrate energy policy into our foreign affairs and our security policies. If you look where we stand today, the Russia threat that we face today, we ourselves in Europe, we funded this threat for years. And we always thought that if we keep trading and if we keep buying oil and gas from Russia, then it will never lead to war. And look where we are now. We even thought this after 2014, 2015, when Russia already invaded Ukraine and when a plane with 300 citizens, among which 200 Dutch citizens, was shot down. Even after that happened, we thought that we could re-establish relations with Russia by trading and buying their oil and gas. But it all turned out to be untrue, because you cannot deal with an aggressor, or by dealing with an aggressor, you cannot prevent war. We are currently, as the Netherlands, we are not in war with Russia, but we are also not living in peace. We are living in a gray zone in which hybrid tools like energy are used as a mechanism, are used as a tool for pressure. Look, for example, at the sanctions that we have put in place, but that are also circumvented by Russia in different ways. This means that in order to have an effective security policy and effective energy policy, we need to integrate all the tools that we have. Intelligence, cyber capabilities, diplomacy, energy policy, and also defense. Because it's in our shared interest to safeguard supply chains and also to safeguard maritime routes. And I'm very, of course, very positive, and we should give compliments to the combined maritime forces that are here in Bahrain. We can compliment Bahrain and also the United States for that. But the only way to effectively safeguard those maritime routes is by integrating all the tools and all the measures that we have. The second point that I would like to raise is the shadow fleet. Energy is militarized, and what we have seen over the last years, in order to avoid the sanctions that we put in place, a big shadow fleet for transporting oil has emerged. And we try to support Ukraine as much as we can. We also try to put pressure on Russia to come to the negotiation table by sanctioning Russia and by putting more economic pressure on Putin. But through the shadow fleet, not only is it undermining our efforts to get to a peaceful solution, it's also undermining the international rule of law that we all count on. It's also creating a lot of risks for the environment, because the ships of the shadow fleet are outdated, are unchecked, and are simply dangerous. We should coordinate much more our international efforts together with like-minded countries. We should strengthen our monitoring, our data sharing, our enforcement, and also exchange best practices when it comes to the shadow fleet. Third topic I would like to raise is maritime security and underwater infrastructure. Because if you look at the current global trade, 80% of goods are traded through maritime routes, and 95% of international data is going through subsea cables. And we do see that those lines of communication and critical underwater infrastructure is highly vulnerable. We have seen that there are Russian ships, for example, sabotaging this undersea infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. And what we do also face is not only that particular threat, but an accumulation of threats. In this region, piracy, armed robbery is still as much of a threat as it has been in the past. But now also the threat of undersea sabotage by state actors is coming on top of it. So this also means that we should strengthen our international coordination on this, that we should share intelligence, should share best practices, and that we should also help each other with technological innovation, because also in the commercial sector and in the scientific world, a lot of useful innovation is taking place all around the world that we can both use in order to strengthen our security and protect our vital infrastructure. So to sum up, I would like to call for action in 3 ways. First, we need to strengthen our situational awareness at sea. We should strengthen our surveillance capabilities, and we should exchange much more information and more best practices. Second, we should strengthen our resilience. And it means preventing sabotage from happening in the first place. But if those efforts are still taking place, we should be able to withstand it. And if our adversaries are effective, we should be able to recover from those disruptions. And third, we should strengthen our deterrence. On the one hand, that means strengthening our military capabilities. It also means investing in technological innovation, but it also means making sure that we have the right legal frameworks in place and that we bolster our law enforcement. Only if we do those 3 things, we can make sure that all around the world, energy remains a foundation for prosperity and stability, instead of a weapon to pressure others and to disrupt. In order to realize that, we need to work on the principles of trust, transparency, and strengthen our shared resilience. Only if we do that across the world, in Europe, the Middle East, and other places, we can make sure that energy remains a source of connection and not a source for confrontation. Thank you.
Mr. Minister Brekelmans, thank you very much. Energy in a defense context, I think the 3 points you ended on there in your call for action, situational awareness, resilience and deterrence, I invite the audience to pick up on those and see what can be done across those 3 areas. And with that, I'd like to invite Deputy Secretary Danley to take the floor.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to begin by thanking our hosts for the extraordinarily gracious and warm welcome that we've had since we've been here, and for the IISS for the continuing engagement and the importance of this forum that has been around for decades. And just from the discussions that we've had and the interactions with the other delegates and people here, it is as vital as it ever has been. So thank you. I agree with the basic premise that we've heard now a couple of times that energy security is national security. That, of course, is why it is that we're focusing on it in this forum. I will say that in that vein, it is critical for us to realize that the ultimate objective is living together harmoniously and through peace, achieving prosperity for everyone. Right? The purpose of the national security element here is to ensure that we have the kind of stability that we bring the world in this region from whatever struggles we have and friction into a time of peace and tranquility that allows us to move forward and ensure that the people of every country within the region can live prosperous, happy lives. And of course, energy is the underpinning to all prosperity. The question before us is how we as leaders in our various countries are going to be able to ensure that prosperity. And the answer, which is the centerpiece of President Trump's vision and Secretary Wright's vision, is affordable, reliable, and secure energy. That means that we recognize that energy is the underpinning of every sector of the economy, right? Energy is thought of as just one sector, but in reality it underpins absolutely everything that's done in every economy. And this is why, as you heard earlier from Secretary Burgum earlier this morning, the policy of the United States now is not one of energy transition, it is one of energy addition, right? We want to ensure that we have as much reliable, affordable, secure energy, and that comes in all manner of forms that are dispatchable and readily used so that we can power all of the requirements of modernity, modern life, industrialization, data centers. We live in a time of extraordinary change, both in the security landscape and in the energy landscape, right? We have threats to national security all of us face that are emergent, vectors that we've never seen before, evolving at a pace that's extraordinarily rapid and changing at all times. And we have a set of demands that we've never seen before, rising demand, especially for electricity, in virtually every country that has never been seen at this rate before. The way to handle that is, again, the attitude of abundance. And it's through energy abundance in as many forms and from as many quarters as we can find it that we're going to be able to meet that demand. Now, within the region, what our hope is to ensure that we have as many ties between the various countries in the region as we can to ensure that there is shared prosperity and a shared destiny. And even taking the morality tale of relying upon Russian oil and gas, the hope is that friends and allies between themselves can enter into the mutually beneficial commercial arrangements that will ensure that everybody gets to share in the abundance and that every country manages to engage in the kind of profitable mutual trade that ensures that everybody is able to have the most prosperous country that they can. I was in Baghdad this last week to attend the signing ceremony for Accelerate Energy's new LNG terminal that is going to allow for the import of a large quantity of LNG into Iraq. This, of course, is historic not only because it portends a great increase in the total amount of electric generation Iraq is going to have. I've seen varying estimates, as much as twice as many the number of hours of electric power delivered as has been before once it's up and running. But I think of it more as a typification of the very point that I'm getting at, that in times of chaos, it's very difficult to have that kind of infrastructure built, which is critical to the delivery of energy. It's also impossible to enter into the commercial arrangements necessary as the underpinnings for such deals to be made between countries and counterparties. That project is critical, and I'm hoping it's going to be the first of many that ties the entire region together so that throughout the whole of the Middle East, we have as many commercial arrangements between countries that Iraq can be a partner, for example, to Syria, exporting electricity to help Syria as it goes through its reconstruction effort, as the Gulf going forward provides energy to the rest of the Middle East. These are the basic premises of the President's energy policy, which is peace and trade so that everybody can be as prosperous and happy as possible. As I mentioned, we're at this remarkable time of change, both for security and for energy. And it's not only the delivery of energy, but it's also the sources. We have an extraordinary amount of LNG that is being sold across the world. In fact, in the United States, we have doubled the total amount of permitted authorized exports, doubled it in the last year to about 13 BCF, and we're going to be doubling that number again in the coming, let's say, 4, 5, 6 years as new LNG export terminals come online. That is geostrategically critical, and the United States wants to be the best possible partner, a reliable and solid partner to our friends and allies to ensure that they too can reap the benefits of American energy abundance. And of course, we're blessed with extraordinarily abundant energy in the United States, and we want to make it available to the entire world, including to ourselves, of course, and engage in as much of the mutually beneficial trade that's the centerpiece of the President's policies as possible. This LNG is one facet of it. Another one is nuclear. I think that it's very unlikely that we are going to be able over the long term to meet the kind of demand we're seeing, especially from reindustrialization, manufacturing, and data centers as we've been seeing without a rapid and broad deployment of nuclear power. And the United States has engaged in extremely, I would say, thoughtful but also aggressive development of nuclear power capacity or capability in the United States. We have a pilot program that the Department of Energy is leading in which a dozen-odd different SMR designs are being put forward. They're going to be prototyped under the auspices of the Department of Energy, and then hopefully the plan anyway, a very aggressive timeline, is to bring them to criticality by July 4th of next calendar year. That is less than a year and a half from the inauguration of the President, a breathtaking pace of development, but we're on track for it. And when we manage to get them approved and operational, they're going to end up having a transformative effect, because small modular reactors, not the large gigawatt scale ones, but the small ones are strategically placeable at various points on the bulk power system to not just deliver real power, which of course is critical, but also relieve congestion and transmission constraints, basically yielding a much larger quantity of capacity over the transmission system that exists than previously existed, because the ancillary services provided by the generators will support the bulk power system. These are just a couple of examples of how America, and of course I should say, our hope of course is that you all buy our nuclear technology, right? I'm here in part to encourage you to do so. But it is with efforts such as those that America wants to stand ready and be the greatest partner that we can be to our friends and allies, and help everybody share in the energy abundance agenda that the President has. Thank you very much.
Deputy Secretary, thank you very much for those remarks. Affordable, reliable, secure energy. I think you touched upon that attitude of abundance, I think you said, and the importance of reliable partnerships to actually spread that benefit. And I think there's a theme there also where conflict and weak international rules make that a bit harder to achieve. So I wonder how people might want to engage with that point. Osama, may I invite you, Secretary General, may I invite you to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure for me to be back to Manama Dialogue. And I would like to start by thanking IISS and the Kingdom of Bahrain for the invitation, the warm hospitality, and definitely the excellent organization. And also, it's a pleasure for me to be here among these distinguished panelists talking about the topic of today's session, geopolitics of energy. And I think it could not be more important or timely as this time, and also specifically for our region, the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean. And if we can move specifically to the Eastern Mediterranean, I think the least we can say is that the East Mediterranean is geopolitically sensitive region with, I think, a lot of challenges over the past 2 years, mainly the Israel-Gaza war with its different surrounding conflicts. And what's happening is definitely impacting not just the region, but actually the impact goes beyond the region, and it's not exaggerating if we say that it also impacts the whole world. Having said that, I think it's important also to reflect that our region is quite sensitive because not just of the war, but the different shifting influence and competition for power is also adding to the complexity and the geopolitics of our region. I think it's, in spite of what's happening and these geopolitical sensitivity, also the region has a lot of potential for energy resources. Gas already discovered, in addition to more gas potential to be discovered, also massive potential for renewables, solar and wind. This could be seen as more adding to the conflicts, as a fuel for conflicts, but I think we have an opportunity here to change this classical concept about energy, and maybe it could be a catalyst for more stability and resilience in our region. But to do so, how can we do this in spite of all these challenges? I think we need to go beyond geology and geography, and there are several elements to address, but I will try to focus on three main elements in this regard. One is that we need to identify and create the proper and favorable opportunities that can be truly win-win and create shared prosperity. The second element is that we need to also to develop policies and environment that are conducive to attract more investments, which are very important to create difference on the ground. The third element is about technology and technology sharing and creating infrastructure that can create a more integrated region that achieve energy security. And maybe I would like to take advantage of these three elements and to move to talk about the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. Because the mission of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum is quite in line with these objectives and these elements. We are supported in this mission by the unique convening power that we have at the EMGF, not just of governments, but also of the industry and regulators, to create more projects, to create interconnectivity for shared prosperity. And I believe we have some successful examples, and the recent example of this success is the recent agreement signed between Cyprus and Egypt. And they are definitely win-win. They are good for Cyprus because it will allow it to develop its gas discoveries that have been discovered for a long time. It's good for Egypt because some of this gas will satisfy the local demand, and some of the gas will be re-exported through utilization of LNG capacity in the existing infrastructure. It's good for Europe because it will provide a source of diversification of energy, and it's good definitely for the companies because it will allow them to recover their costs and also achieve return on investments. And maybe this sounds much easier or simpler than it really is. Because it's not just through energy or energy connectivity we can achieve stability in our region. There is a very important element that we also need to address, which is a horizon for a political solution, which might seem quite difficult or challenging given the situation that we have been through over the past 2 years. But I believe the agreement signed in Sharm el-Sheikh last week and the Peace Summit and President Trump's 20-point peace plan give us some hope. Still, it is challenging, it is complicated, but I think the good thing is that now we have ceasefire, although fragile, but we're hopeful that with the support and actually eagerness of not just the US, but the world leaders who attended the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, we can have something, not just stop the war, but really something that can give hope to the people of the region of having peaceful coexistence. And maybe one important thing also is that we don't have any other alternatives. Rather than trying to set the proper environment for peaceful coexistence and interconnectivities between our region and the people of the region. Thank you.
Secretary General, thank you very much for those remarks. So identifying opportunities for shared benefits, ways to attract investment, and technology sharing as a route to a more integrated view of energy security. Again, a lot to dig into. We already have a bunch of people seeking the floor, so we will now turn to questions, and I will again invite a group of people to ask their questions. I encourage others to still join the queue, and as I say it, it does happen magically. Thank you very much. We'll start with Badr Al-Saif from Kuwait.
Thank you, Bastian, Your Excellencies. Thank you for the presentation. My question is to the ministers from the Czech Republic and the Netherlands. Obviously, energy security is an important aspect of the relationship between the EU and the GCC, and we welcome the diversification that you guys are doing as we are diversifying out of the Gulf. But there has to be a full-rounded view of energy security because, as you know, there has been concerns from our side, namely from the Qatari side, and the US has joined those efforts as well in terms of the corporate sustainability rules that have been applied on the LNG contracts. And I know that there has been some discussion following the joint US-Qatari letter, and even prior to that, concerning some modifications on this issue. Where do we stand with this modification? Do you think we will see something soon? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the United States, Jonathan Bass.
Hi, I'm from Argent LNG, a development project in Louisiana, lifting 25 million tons. My question to you is, how do we continue to fund these projects when companies like Woodmac are saying that energy is going to be abundant and cheap and the banks aren't willing to lean in? And how do we make a bet in the future against that?
Thank you very much. And from Oman and the Young Leaders Group, Hailana Al-Busaidi.
Good evening, everyone. My question is for the representative from the Netherlands. Given Europe's shifting its security landscape, how does the Netherlands view the importance of strategic partnership with non-European allies, specifically in the Gulf region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From Bahrain, Hassan Al-Hassan.
Thank you very much. First question to the European members of the panel. The EU indeed has diversified its imports of energy and notably gas away from Russia. That is indeed correct. But instead it has sourced nearly now half of its LNG imports from the United States. And so in a sense has replaced dependency on one actor by perhaps a dependency on another actor, which also happens to have territorial ambitions on Greenland, and until a tariff agreement that was concluded in July was essentially engaged in a tariff war of words against the EU bloc. So is this real diversification that is being achieved, or is it simply replacing one dependency for another? A second question to Mr. Mubaraz, very quickly. We've seen amid the growing geopolitical tensions in the Mediterranean, a growing proclivity, especially on the part of Israel, to weaponize some of its resource dominance vis-à-vis its neighbors. We've seen this in water, where the Israelis have used Jordanian water dependence to pressure the Jordanians into silencing some of their criticism. There's been Israeli flirtation with delaying some of the new gas arrangements with Egypt in response to Egypt's strident criticism of Israeli policy in Gaza. How do you, as the Eastern Mediterranean, work to insulate energy connectivity and cooperation from geopolitical tensions? Thank you.
Hassan, thank you very much. And from Jordan and the Young Leaders Group, Mohammed Hawash.
Thank you. My question is for Deputy Secretary Danley. So the U.S., as you said, doubled its allocation of gas exports this year to 13 billion cubic feet. And there are plans to double it again and again. And a big component of these plans is the project to develop a pipeline in Alaska. However, there are big questions about the feasibility of this project, especially from the private sector in Japan and Korea, which is supposed to be responsible for building this pipeline. So could you comment on this feasibility aspect and how you're planning to confront it?
Thank you very much. From the United Kingdom, Julia Wu.
Thanks, Bastian. My question is for Minister Breckelmans. You've really clearly articulated how in today's energy system, digital and physical infrastructure are inseparable, from remote monitoring, subsea cables, as well as AI-enabled grids. And I think that your call to action for situational awareness, resilience, rapid recovery, etc., makes a lot of sense. But concretely, who do you think should actually pay for the resilience? What are we really investing in? Is it technology, coordination, or capacity building? And ultimately, does that responsibility sit with producers in the region or with their partners in Europe and the US?
Thank you, Julia. And from Japan, Okana Asano.
Yes, thank you so much. My question is the current response from the governments or corporate to the ongoing energy security and geopolitical shifts. So all of you mentioned, my question is to everyone. All of you mentioned that the energy geopolitics goes beyond the oil and the gas. In addition to that the geopolitical risks such as the Ukraine, Russia, or Middle East, the geopolitical, like the sensitivity and the critical minerals and the very complex, diverse supply chain and globally clean tech innovation and digital infrastructure such as data center, AI, and then the development of semiconductors. These all will combined with the increase in the global energy demand. The energy source and the security is a big issue now. But at the same time, these technology shifts as well as the geopolitical tensions and are reshaping the trade and the security linkages in around the world. And my question is that whether the current energy diplomacy and the investments from the governments and the private sector are enough adapting for these fast the change in environment.
Thank you very much. So I'll stop here for now. I have a few more people on the list, so those who'd like to join, please do so. We'll come back for a second round, but maybe let us tackle those questions that we have so far. Let's go in that order that we started. So, Mr. Minister Pascal, I'll start with you. There were a few questions directed at everybody, but there were also a few specifically to you. The EU's shift from Russian gas to US LNG, what does that mean? Is that a dependency that you're comfortable with? I think I might know the answer, but let's see. And then there were a few others. Why don't you start, and then we'll come down the line.
Yes. So the dependency which was created with the pipeline was very hard to break. Easier in gas, since LNG created a market for gas, something which was not there 10 years, 15 years ago in such a way we have it now. So now with the US, it's not a dependency in a sense that we could import the gas only from the US, and we are very happy to import it from US, and the US is our strategic ally. We are both members of NATO, and I think it's worth to say that we are creating a strategic partnership which builds upon the same view of national security, and the USA has never forced Czechia in a way as Soviet Union and Russia did in the past or trying to do nowadays. So we fully trust in technology sharing, we fully trust in being NATO allies, and happily we trust each other when doing energy trade. But the point was that diversification means to have a possibility to have a choice, to not be dependent on one source of delivery, so that even it's not the possibility to start using as a bargaining chip, which I think it's quite understandable. And with our connection to Telsport, we now have also option to buy from different sellers of oil. We do buy now oil from Gulf countries, from South American countries, and also we buy oil, or we are now talking about buying oil from the USA. So that's created, let's say, our energy independency. And of course, we are always very happy to when the US is provider of our energy supply. So that would be my answer to that. And if I may also touch upon the question which contained corporate sustainability due diligence directive, because that's something which I hear every time when I visit Gulf countries. And I think we have to understand that the intention of this directive I consider by myself as a good intention, but honestly we have to look at European competitiveness. We have to look at the ways how those measures are being implemented, and I think this needs scrutiny. Definitely Czechia could be considered as a very cautious country when implementing those measures, and let's say that the further refinement of the legislation is needed to achieve reasonable conditions also for suppliers of energy. So let's say that I hear these concerns, and definitely Czech position is that we want to do more work on that, so we find a good way how to implement it or change it, so Europe will keep its own level of competitiveness, which definitely is our big struggle.
Thank you very much. Minister Brekelmans, you might want to add on both points, on the diversification point, on the corporate sustainability, on the rules. You also had a question on how the Netherlands views its partnerships with non-European allies, particularly in the Gulf, of course, and that question of paying for energy resilience, what one should invest in. Maybe we'll start there and then add anything else you'd like to touch on.
Yes, let me address it in that order. So I agree with what my colleague said about the directives. I think most of those directives start with the right intentions, but what of course we are now facing over the last couple of years is that we need to look whether we can achieve all that given the security challenges that we face. And second, also given the economic challenges that we face, because we do see that the impact of a lot of those directives are felt by companies for which the administrative burden is increasing, or for which the requirements are sometimes too challenging to reach within the time frame that is included. So I think overall you see in Europe that there is a discussion not to put the goals aside in the end, but to make it more realistic and make it more feasible both for ourselves and for our partners. And I think this is one of the directives in which this discussion is still ongoing, and it's all, of course, about the details, but it hasn't been finalized yet. But we need to remain in touch on that to make sure that it's feasible. Second, LNG from the US. I think we should never compare the United States to Russia. Of course, in our marriage with the United States, there are sometimes some discussions, but it's not like Russia, which is attacking us, which is threatening us, and the United States is our main security ally. So we need to make a very clear distinction with that. I think we as EU and as Europe, we should decrease our dependency on others in general. We have done that too easily. Same is true for China, for Russia, for others as well. So we need to invest in our own industries, in our own resources. But if I can choose to be dependent on either the US or Russia, I don't think there's any easier choice that I have to make in my life. Then third, regarding the strategic partnerships, yes, that is extremely important. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. We just had elections in the Netherlands. It's been quite an intense week. But for me, it's very important to be here because we want to reach out to partners outside of the EU, because part of becoming more self-reliant and dependent is to make sure that we strengthen our ties with and strengthen our partnerships with other countries. Take, for example, the defense industry. One of the biggest challenges that we have is to ramp up our industrial capabilities. And we need to do this together with our partners, because there's a lot that we can learn from each other, exchange of technological innovation, resources that we can share. I think there are many untapped opportunities, and that's only for the defense industry. There are many, many more. And I think it's very important that we, given the world that we are in, that we strengthen the partnerships and the ties between like-minded countries. And fourth, who should pay for the resilience? That's a very good question. And I think the answer is multi-layered, in the sense that I said that in order to address the topic of resilience, you need to, of course, be able to prevent attacks or sabotage from happening. But if it happens, you need to be able to withstand it, and you need to be able to recover from it. So it starts with the individual. We in the Netherlands, we have now a big campaign on societal resilience and on military preparedness. And what we say to citizens in the Netherlands is that you should be prepared for example, a power outage or a data outage for 27 hours or 72 hours. And the responsibility starts with the individual. Then, of course, we need to make sure that the companies that are investing in that infrastructure or that are owning that infrastructure, that they also take their responsibility to make sure that the cybersecurity is in place and that other measures are taken that is within their responsibilities and within the things that they can do. But of course, governments also thirdly play a very important role in this, and we should also invest in defending that infrastructure. So we as the Netherlands, we invest in our monitoring capabilities, we invest in our Navy. We also make sure that we do not only use military assets for that, but also civilian assets from our Coast Guard. So we all need to make sure that we bolster those capabilities. And then finally, fourth, we need to also increase and strengthen our international cooperation through the EU, through NATO, to make sure that in terms of surveillance that we cover the entire areas in which there is undersea infrastructure. And to make sure that we have the right regulations in place, that we have the right response options in place, and that we also all act in the same manner, or at least to some degree that we act with a similar tactic, because it is quite strange if you look at the typical trading routes, for example. It would be quite strange that the Baltic states respond differently compared to the Netherlands or to France or to Spain. So to coordinate those efforts, I think those mechanisms, EU, NATO, other institutions, those are also very important.
Thank you very much. Deputy Secretary Danley, Jonathan's question is still out there. How do you attract investment when the expectation is that LNG will be cheap and some of the investment obviously initially isn't?
Yep.
There was that specific question on some of the feasibility concerns around some pipeline projects.
Alaska, yep.
And then you might perhaps also want to say something about whether energy diplomacy in itself is energized enough to keep pace with the developments, geopolitical developments and the technological environment. Over to you.
First, though, I'd like to also talk about the question about substituting Russia.
Yes, of course.
Right?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I imagine you might. Yeah.
I am delighted to have the Dutch reaffirm the enthusiasm for America. The question's premise was surprising, but okay, fair enough. I don't think I'm getting out over my skis to say that Russia and America are not similarly situated countries. They don't behave the same. They don't have the same objectives. And we don't even have to talk about the posture of Russia or America towards Europe. Just to remind everybody, America and the Europeans are allied, right? We have been since World War II. But on top of that, you sign a contract with an American supplier and they don't fulfill the obligations that they have under the contract, you can go and sue them in the United States in a court in Delaware. And if you have the better of the argument, you're going to win. Right? That is one of the glories of the American commercial system, is that our courts are fair and that our contracts are actually read as they're written, and you can rely upon your counterparties. There's another thing, too. When it comes to LNG imports from the United States, even if you enter into an arrangement with the United States, there are other potential sources of cargoes. This was already alluded to, but I just want to say it again. If the terms of the offtake from an American supplier are not good enough, you can always go to a different one. There is real competition, and the entire global market can compete, and something that America is not afraid of is competition. We welcome the idea of having our cargoes compete with other countries, and you go and you get the best price you can on the terms that you find most beneficial, and we will meet every competitor BCF for BCF. And then the question was how to finance, right? So I myself have committed the sin of using the word cheap for energy in the future. But if you listen to the triad of affordable, reliable, secure, the word isn't cheap, reliable, secure, it's affordable, right? The reality is, as energy becomes less expensive because of higher production, the cost goes down, and as soon as the cost goes down, more is consumed. Right? This is why when people talk, for example, about the increasing demand from artificial intelligence or data centers, well, what happens if we come up with a set of chips that are 5, 6 orders of magnitude more efficient? The answer isn't that there's going to be less demand. The answer is there's going to be more compute. And so similarly, as the prices drop, this is Econ 101, more energy is going to be consumed because the passion in the human heart for further prosperity and development is not going to be changed by the fact that we reach a certain point, energy is abundant, okay, we're done now. No, there's going to be greater flourishing and more development of every kind. And then, the last one was Alaska.
Yep.
So how do I or we and the government plan to build the Alaska pipeline? The government doesn't build pipelines. We're not living in the era of the New Deal, right? The role that we have when looking at Section 3 export terminals, that's Section 3 of the Natural Gas Act, not that anybody cares, but that is the statutory regime under which they're permitted. What the government does is it determines whether or not the project that's proposed is in the public interest. In the case of the Alaska LNG project, it was determined to be in the public interest, and I know that because I voted for it when I was on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The question as to whether or not it's built is something that is entirely a commercial question, and the commercial actors will determine whether or not they believe the value proposition to be there. Now, I think the Alaska LNG pipeline and export terminal have real benefits. The latency period for cargoes to get from Alaska to Asia is very short. It's a secure transportation route. The reserves in the north part of Alaska are absolutely immense, and once production begins, that is an opportunity to produce an absolutely incredible quantity of natural gas and LNG for export. But we will see. It is not the U.S. government's role to go around commanding the specific creation of infrastructure like this. It's a commercial question.
Thank you very much. We will return for a couple of questions after I invite the Secretary General to address this first round, but we will come back for a few. And if I look at the list, we probably have room for one or two more, so if people want to come in, feel free to join the queue. Secretary General, there was one particular question on how does the East Mediterranean Gas Forum insulate energy cooperation from geopolitical tensions and the weaponization of resources. And in a way, the Eastern Mediterranean is, of course, an area where some of these things come together. It's quite a complex region, as we already touched upon. But perhaps you can also say something about the investment requirement versus the expectation of cost and price, and then anything else you'd like to pick up on.
Sure, thank you. So yes, definitely, it is complex. Sometimes you cannot just separate geopolitics from energy and from the investments. But to talk specifically about the example about Israel and Egypt and the gas deal, first there has been a lot of news reports which are not all correct. And maybe I would start with the question: how can DMGF or the different stakeholders, how can they make sure that whatever deal or agreement is respected in spite of the geopolitics? I think the main answer would be it has to be win-win. There has to be added value for the different stakeholders. And this is the case between Egypt and Israel. Yes, Egypt have some of this gas for the domestic market, some of it for re-export, but also Israel have an advantage because this is the outlet for the surplus gas that they have. Otherwise, they will not be able to produce, and more importantly, they will not be able to attract more investments to find more gas. And it's definitely good for the companies. And just to give an example, in spite of the war over the 2 years, the disruption of the gas flows was very minimal. maybe it was once or twice, and it was only for just a few days. So I think this is an important proof that, yes, in spite of the turbulences, but it's still an economic and shared benefit project, still it can go ahead. For the point about the forecast and how do we see energy and how would this impact investments, so I think the first thing to say is that it's quite difficult to have a forecast of anything, especially for energy. So, and whatever forecast is not accurate, and who can do this accurately, I think he can make a lot of money, which is good. But specifically, I personally believe that the world will need more energy because of different things. Because of still a lot of parts of the world there are development is not enough, and also there is enough, or let's say, energy poverty in Africa and in a lot of parts of the world. And also because of AI and the let's say the breakthrough in AI, it will need a lot of energy. So this means even if we have more LNG, more gas, this does not mean that it's going to be, let's say, again, cheaper is not maybe the right word, but at least we will need a lot of investment so that we can find more energy, develop more energy to cope with the growing needs of energy globally.
Thank you very much. So we'll take a final group of 5 questions, and then we'll have concluding comments from the panel. First up in this round is Alexander Bolfrast from Germany.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I have 2 questions for Deputy Secretary Danley. First, would the U.S. be taking back the spent fuel from exported SMRs? Second, President Trump has announced a return to nuclear testing, but has been so far rather coy on what precisely he has in mind. So I guess the question that raises for me is whether the DOE has any concerns about the reliability of the stockpile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the UK, John Chipman.
Yes, my question is for Deputy Secretary Danley. In your prepared remarks, you tantalizingly referred to your recent visit in Iraq, and I wonder whether you could give us a couple of minutes on your analysis of the prospects for Iraq returning to becoming a global energy player. The geopolitics in the title there, as it were, national geopolitics within Iraq that may frustrate its aspirations in this regard, and what energy diplomacy are you and your colleagues engaged in to bring Iraq more formidably into the market?
Thank you, John. From the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Brynja Oskar-Dottir. Sorry, Brynja.
You're doing great on learning how to pronounce my very complicated last name. Hi, I'm here in the middle. First of all, thank you all for excellent remarks this afternoon. So my question relates to a statement made this morning by U.S. Secretary of Interior on national energy security and national security in the 1.5%. My question is directed to Dutch Minister for Defense Brekelmans, but I welcome input from the other 2 NATO allies on the stage. It's in terms of investing in the 1.5%. So, Mr. Brekelman, you provided a very good opening to my question in terms of saying energy security equals defense. If you could please elaborate on if the Netherlands will be pushing for investments in energy, such as pipelines, to be included in the new 1.5% as agreed by leaders in your home country this summer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. From the UK, Fenella McGurty.
Thank you, Bastian. My question is also for Minister Brekelmans. You mentioned about defence industrial partnerships. Would you be able to elaborate on which partners specifically in the region present the greatest opportunities for the Netherlands to work with? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the UK, Tom Beckett.
Thank you. It's again, Deputy Secretary Danley, before you, Senator Burgum. You spoke very clearly and compellingly about U.S. energy policy and strategy, and I think that's really good. But my question, and you also said that U.S. is not Russia, and I don't think anyone in this room would ever presume that U.S. is Russia. But do you have a comms problem? And I say that because for three things. Cracking the whip on Europe to divest from Russian oil and gas is a good thing. But the European outliers are pro-Russian and White House favorites. The sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil are great, but they're the first sanctions that this administration has applied to Russia, and they don't come into effect for another 20 days, and that's enough time for about 6 180s in Washington. And then the last piece is that, and it's instructive to me, was that the only country in the world not to have tariffs imposed on it on Liberation Day was Russia. So do you have a comms problem in guaranteeing reliable and secure supply to the rest of the world when they divest from Russia?
Thank you very much, Tom. And last one, Jonathan Bass, who probably feels we haven't quite answered his question. Jonathan.
No, well, my question is for Deputy Secretary Danley. How do we assure our customers for Gulf Coast, Gulf of America, LNG, that if we see a return of the Democrats, that they wouldn't unilaterally again shut down LNG exports in the middle of a Ukraine-Russia conflict and leave our friends, shared countries, and values on the side of the curve?
Thank you very much. So we've got 8 minutes left. What we will do is I will see whether Secretary General wants to add any concluding thoughts in reaction to this. I'll then ask Minister Lipavsky the same, and then we have Minister Brekelmans and Deputy Secretary Danley who have a couple of direct questions to them. Osama, anything you would like to add and by way of concluding thoughts?
I think most of the questions were for Thomas and the...
You'll stay out of it. Yeah. Okay. Minister Lipavsky.
So my conclusion from this debate is that the world has profoundly moved in the last few years, and this debate proves that we are asking right questions in a difficult time. So I'm very happy to be part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So that leaves us with a few minutes for Minister Brekelmans and Deputy Secretary Danley. Minister Brekelmans, let me turn to you. So there was that question, will the Netherlands push to include energy investment, pipeline, other infrastructure in that 1.5% part of NATO's defense spending target? And you also were invited to speak a little bit more about defense industrial partnerships that the Netherlands might be interested in here in the region and perhaps also elsewhere. Minister.
Yeah. Regarding the 1.5%, I think energy infrastructure should be included in it because the definition of 1.5% is still very broad, but it's about security-related or defense-related investments. I think if you look at the energy infrastructure that we need for our military operations and for our military mobility, still some investments need to be made, and this can provide a good incentive to include that. I think the challenge is to not make the definition too wide or too broad, because if you include any type of investment in infrastructure, then you already have 1.5% for only energy infrastructure, and we also need physical infrastructure for roads and other things, but also cybersecurity. So there's a whole list of things that can be included in at 1.5%. I know that most ministers of finance want to have a very broad definition because then they already are beyond the 1.5%. I think for me as a Minister of Defense that wants to see some additional investments, it's better to have a slightly more narrow definition. But I think energy infrastructure should be included in it. But within that broad category, we need to clearly define then what's included and what not. Regarding the defense partnerships, so I think if you want to work together in the defense industry and want to increase the cooperation, you need to have a basic level of trust and a basic level of joint interest. So to say it very simply, I don't see any cooperation with Iran, for example, because we have different security interests, and I don't see any cooperation there. That's one, extreme of the spectrum. And I think the first thing, of course, you look at is the countries with which we already have a close relationship in terms of military cooperation, but also in terms of trade and industrial cooperation. But I don't think that we should only look at our typical partners in the region, because many of the things that we need as a military and myself as a Minister of Defense is more dual-use technologies. And many innovations that are happening when it comes to AI or to quantum or in the semicon industry or whatever, can also be applied in the defense industry. And if you look at drone technology, for example, or the newest types of drones, it's a combination of batteries, it's a combination of radar systems, sensors, and you could also, I think there are also partners here in the region with which the current military cooperation or industrial cooperation is limited, but which there are many more opportunities if you look at the latest innovations and the type of innovations that are taking place. So we as the Netherlands, but also as the EU, we are open to any partnerships with countries for which there is a basic level of trust. And I think almost everyone in this room could be a very valuable partner.
Thank you very much. Deputy Secretary, you've got 3 minutes to tap onto these.
I will try to do honor to all the questions asked. So first, the follow-up for Mr. Bass. So there is a certain degree of risk of change of policy, that's true. But let's remember what exactly it was that happened under the previous administration. It was a terrible policy, it was backward thinking, and it definitely was not in line with the President's vision of energy abundance. But what the Department of Energy did was it put a temporary stop on new export licenses to non-free trade agreement countries. So it didn't cease existing previously issued export licenses. It stopped the issuance of new ones for a period of time. I've heard this question in various forms several times while I've been in the current role that I have, and there's a widespread misunderstanding that the Biden administration ended exports for those companies that were already exporting, and that's not true. The United States still has the takings clause. There is quite a heavy burden to meet in order to arrest the commercial arrangements that have already been entered into. So I think that answers the question there. Number two, on Iraq, and I'm doing this as a subject that requires much longer treatment than I'm afraid I'm going to be able to give on this one. So do I think that Iraq can assume its proper place as a geopolitical force in energy production? Yes, I do. The fact that I was at the signing ceremony for Accelerate to be importing LNG to Iraq is crazy. It would be like finding yourself in a situation where Texas is a net importer of oil, right? It's ridiculous to believe that could be the case, but it is. And the reason for that is that Iraq lacks the infrastructure necessary to deliver the benefits of its own energy resources to the wider global market. We are now in a position in Iraq where the security situation is stable. The country has now a fairly stable governance structure. We're in fact going into election season in Iraq, and if you go to Baghdad the way I just had, you'd see campaign posters everywhere. It's a democracy that is going through the normal process of choosing candidates, and there is a definite forward-looking view of the future of the country that the government is interested in the development of that kind of infrastructure. Now it's possible. The last time I was there was 20 years ago, and let me tell you, the place has changed in 2 decades. So I do think that Iraq is on its way there. For the question about SMRs and testing, so SMR fuels, don't know every single case for every one of our licenses and reciprocal agreements is on a case-by-case basis, so it's literally impossible to answer that question. And then as far as the subject of testing goes, DOE is, and I'm assuming this is the predicate for the question, DOE is responsible for stewarding the stockpile. And the question was, are we concerned about it? Well, it is one of our primary objectives in the department. It is one of our main jobs to ensure that the systems are functional, and so we're always concerned about it. On the question about the comms problem, which was a little bit cheeky, but I get the point you're making. Let's not do one thing. Let's not confuse sanctions with tariffs, right? The tariff regime is there so as I've said now a couple times, America welcomes competition. We want to fight it out in the free market and win based on the quality of American innovation, technology, efficiency, and the like. what the president has begun, he's embarked upon a campaign to ensure that all commercial interactions are on a level playing field and that you actually do have competition. So, for example, in critical minerals, we do not want to see improper dumping activities to crush native industries as they begin. So I don't think the question about tariffs was fully opposite to the other question. I guess the larger point about the comms problem, I don't believe that the United States, look, we just had the Dutch agree that we're fantastic partners. I think that most people in the room would agree that the United States has a policy of being good allies and friends to our longstanding trading and military partners. And I don't think the comms problem would, in some as you describe it, I don't agree there is one, would dissuade anybody in the room here from engaging in the kind of commercial enterprises that we're trying to foster at every turn.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that brings our session to a conclusion. I'll invite you to thank our speakers, and we will immediately go on to the next session. Minimal staging break. Our next speaker is here and ready. So, but may I now invite you to thank the speakers of this panel. Thank you very much. Dear delegates, may I invite you to find your seats. We will go straight into the next plenary session of this 21st IISS Manama Dialogue. And we will turn to a subject matter that I imagine might inspire a fair amount of discussion, namely U.S. policy in the Levant. Of course, you all know that the United States is actively engaged in diplomacy to help the domestic consolidation and the regional integration of Syria, as well as speaking to Lebanon to establish full state control over the country. And to speak to us about these efforts and the prospects for stability and security in the region is Tom Barak, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and the U.S. special envoy for Syria. Ambassador Barak will speak from his seat. This is called a conversation, so we will make it a conversation. And once he has delivered his initial remarks, I might ask him one or two questions, but then it is a conversation with all of you, so I encourage you to get your microphones ready, insert your badge, press the button so that you're in the queue, and then I can call upon you to make your contribution to this conversation. So, Ambassador, if I may invite you to speak to us about U.S. policy in the Levant, please.
Thanks, and I first want to give my thanks to His Majesty King Hamad, the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Salman, and Sheikh Nasser. I think being here with a group of professionals like all of you is such a gift, because what we find with one another is what we're missing in our daily dialogue. So my intent is to give you an overview of what President Trump's vision is without burdening you with a lot of philosophy that you're not going to be interested in. Because what you really want to know is what's happening, where are we going, what does Gaza look like, how's Syria, what's Lebanon doing, and how Turkey and Saudi Arabia relating to what's happening in the middle of Syria. So we'll go to your questions. It's more fruitful. But I think what's really of interest, if you take a model of what President Trump is doing. By the way, his message to me was very simple when we started this, which was he had just a few words. And I said, Mr. President, don't bother. I know, make America great and we'll make the world better. He said, that's really not it. The words are, don't confuse efforts with results. Don't confuse efforts with results. For this man means take bold action. Bold action will create momentum, and momentum will bypass the decades and decades of rust we've had on diplomatic cadence in the Middle East. It's never worked. Since 1916, we've started with what everybody hates to hear about the Balfour Declaration and the Sykes-Picot Agreement, what the nation states dividing up as a result of the colonial mandate just wrapped borders around tribes and flags that weren't intended to be nation states. And we've been recovering for 100 years for this. American policy was also equally at fault. We've had maybe 27 regime changes since World War II. We've had 27 disasters. We're still in the aftermath of most of those disasters. Every time we reach in to create a new paradigm, a new voluntary regime, it hasn't worked. So the exporting of these models is not what this president is interested in. What he's interested in is getting your regional participation and going from a payphone to Starlink and bypassing everything else. So what he's doing is leapfrogging along, what you saw happen on June 21st, change the fabric of how America is going to deal in the Middle East. For the first time, a president actually intervened with power behind a peace and prosperity discussion. Now, the rest of the region has an opportunity to fold in. If you look at what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, it was such an amazing event. To have the world leaders, the Middle East leaders, with the European leaders in the background, all uniting around this president in an array of a declaration of saying, we are all here as a voice against fundamentalist terrorism. Unbelievable. Never happened. What does that mean now? What do we do with it? How do we get there? And the fabric of the countries that we'll discuss, I'll get into with you. But the model is really the Manama model. If you look at what happened in Bahrain, you have 250 years of the family dynasty here. The king has been in power a quarter of a century. But if you look at what's happened by global alliance, partnerships, coming back to strength and sovereignty, those are the models that we need to build. Sovereignty is evident. Sovereignty is necessary. But your alliance and your partnerships in this part of the world is essential. And you have a man in Washington who is willing to lead that cause to make it happen. But everybody's got to fold in. Everybody has to give up the scars of the past. It's very difficult to do. But if we don't do it now, we're going to miss an opportunity that will never present itself again. And the Abraham Accords are part of that. What's happening in Gaza is part of that. What's happening in Syria is definitely part of that. And the resistance that's happening in Lebanon is another part of that. So we can talk about these models of what's happening. Syria, with a new regime that came into effect on December 8th. From guerrilla warfare and fatigues to a statesman with 25 million people, a new country, a new opportunity, And President Trump, coming on May 10th, and in 10 minutes in Saudi Arabia, said, give this man a chance. Give this regime a chance. After almost 2 decades of atrocities from Assad, the al-Shara regime steps into place, and in 10 months is speed dating towards something we've never seen. Perhaps even towards the road of normalization with Israel. So we have countries all uniting and saying, great. We've had an issue with Israel since 1928. We had real issues with Israel since 1948. How do we put all that behind us? What's this path of a new Middle East? Middle East has $9 trillion of investable capital. 20 million barrels of oil go out the Straits of Hormuz every day. China buys 11 million of them. You have 30% of all the resources in the world. You have 20% of all the capital in the world. And we're fighting tribes and flags. It's ridiculous. So this president is looking and saying, I'm not going to have boots on the ground. I'm not going to invest U.S. capital in making this happen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be the leader of a bold action. We're going to create momentum. We're going to bolster prosperity and solve these problems from the ground up, not forced from the top down. And that's what's happening in Syria. He lifted the sanctions. We still have the Caesar sanctions. We can talk about that. It's the last one to lift. Senator Rubio got rid of state-sponsored terrorism. It's a look back. It wraps every 6 months, so it comes back December 31st. But this regime has done a very good job, in spite of the speed bumps, right? We have problems in Al-Qaeda. We have problems in the West. In Gaza, we had a ceasefire, and we have speed bumps. It's going to happen. It's going to happen everywhere. And the only way to extinguish those speed bumps is with momentum and prosperity that has to come from the region. And Turkey, on the other hand, has a different framework. It's a non-Arab Muslim country. It has a stable platform. It's our largest NATO ally besides ourselves. And we just had 11 between President Erdogan and President Trump. We talked about F-35s, F-16s, S-400s, $100 billion Boeing contract. Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan now on alignment going north. Could be incredible. We have 3.5 million Syrians in Turkey that speak both Arabic and Turkish. And the opportunity is immense. And Syria, in addition to that, is marching towards Israel. We're on our 5th set of discussions with Israel. Border and boundary discussions, de-escalation. You could very quickly have a realignment of a tapestry that we haven't seen in the Middle East. In Bahrain, they have tapestries, and I'll end with this and we'll go to questions, which is called a Sidhu. And we've been friends with the king. The president loves the family and has been friends with the king for 30 years. And one of his people was explaining to me that the Bahraini Sidhu, it has vertical threads and horizontal threads. And the vertical threads are of the strongest kind of thread because that represents the institutions, the military, the education, the healthcare. If you have those things, a society then gets to discussion of religion and politics and then more liberal thoughts at the end. But without education, without security, without stability, without food on the table, nothing happens. The horizontal threads are the diversity of people. This is an example, Sunni and Shias living side by side. We're living in a really difficult zip code. You have the 3 ethno-religious dominant religions in the world living here, the Middle East. We also have 23 of the most viable foreign terrorist organizations in the world, 18 of them within our zip code. So we're fighting all of these counter winds at a moment where you have a president of the United States who happens to be the leader saying enough. 100 years of this confusion, of these old thoughts, of these old ideas, and people not moving off of them, when you have the most dominant region in the world, if you combine capital with fossil fuels, with resourceful people, has got to end. And that's where he is. That's what we're trying to do.
Ambassador, thank you very much. The list is already long, but I thought I might ask one or two before we open up. And the first one is on Lebanon and your expectations regarding the Lebanese government taking full sovereignty and territorial control. The U.S. has asked for a timeline and a plan. Are you happy with what you have, what you've been given? What else would you like to see and when?
So what I'm going to say, I say lovingly because I'm Lebanese. The Lebanese are fantastic at charming you into submission. They talk, they talk, they talk, and they talk. This is not complicated, right? Let me give you how the President of the United States looks at this. He says, okay, so Hezbollah to America is a foreign terrorist organization. That means the flag on Hezbollah says death to Israel, death to America. We get it. You're not our friend. Hezbollah in Lebanon happens to be a political party also. In addition to that, the French mandate, this confessional system that was invented in the 40s that says the president of Lebanon has to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni, and the speaker has to be a Shia. It was based on population and census. By the way, they haven't had a census for 37 years because, of course, that relates to nothing that's happening now. The Maronites are all living in Paris. The Sunnis have gone someplace else. And the Shias, the Palestinians, and the Syrians are the majority of what's Lebanon today. So you have the Taif agreement that came in to say, okay, we're going to redo this. This isn't working. We've had war after war after war. We had a war in Lebanon with the Palestinians. Then we had a war of Lebanon with the Syrians. Then we had a war with Lebanon with the Israelis. Then we had a war of Lebanon with Lebanon. Now we have a war with Lebanon with the Israelis. And the Taif agreement says no more militias. You had a Christian militia to start with. The warlords of the Christian militias are still there, by the way. Lebanon is a failed state. There's no central bank. The banking system is bust. Riyad Salameh, the head of the central bank, has been indicted all across Europe. There's $60 billion missing from the Lebanese banking system. There's another $75 billion if you take $50 billion of euro bonds plus interest. So you have $130 billion of state debt. They refuse to do a gap assessment. They refuse to deal with the World Bank. They refuse to deal with the IMF. The Electricité du Liban, like the Banque du Liban, is bust, is broke. There's no electricity. You have electricity, you need a private generator. You want water, you need private water. You want education, you need private water. So what's the state? State is Hezbollah. You go south, Hezbollah gives you water, it gives you an education, gives you a stipend, has 40,000 soldiers. LAF, Lebanese Armed Forces, has 60,000 soldiers. The only problem is the Hezbollah soldiers make $2,200 a month. The LAF soldiers make $275 a month. The Hezbollah soldiers have 15,000, 20,000 rockets and missiles. The LAF soldiers are driving old Jeeps, some AK-47s. So which army is which? What's happening here? So the idea of disarming Hezbollah, in our opinion, it's not reasonable to tell Lebanon forcibly disarm one of your political parties. Everybody's scared to death to go into civil war. The idea is, what can you do to have Hezbollah not utilize those rockets and missiles? You have a moment in time. You have Israel, who is sitting ready to make border and boundary agreements with all its neighbors. And it owes America a favor. On June 21st, when President Trump sent those B-2 bombers in, he did something for Israel that was an incredible reshaping of the region. So our message to Lebanon was, end this. Forget about the confessional system. You can't say the word Israel in Lebanon. I say this lovingly. They still call it Dixie, south of the Litani. It's illegal to have a conversation with Israel. What era are we living in? Do you see what's happening? You have America side by side. You have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, two of the smartest people in the world working for President Trump. You've seen Tulsi and Doug and James all here today. You have a team that's working for the world. Get online. You do not have time. Israel every day is bombing the South. Why? because you still have thousands of rockets and missiles that are threatening it. They've been very clear. After October 7th, Israel has said, we are going to defend our boundaries, we're going to defend our borders. You put your weapons down, Hezbollah, and we will not have a problem. We're not going to withdraw, we're not going to have a problem. So we don't have time for this diplomatic cadence. By the way, the diplomatic cadence was used with Iran. And by the way, I like that the Lebanese leadership today is solid. President Aoun, Nouaf, even Speaker Berry. They're trying, but they're dinosaurs. You have to go from the payphone to Starlink, not the payphone to home phones, not home phones then to cell phones. You've got to go to Starlink. And Starlink is you go from Beirut to Tel Aviv. You have that conversation on the blue line, you have the conversation with Syria, and in 4 months you could end all of this. Is that going to happen?
Ambassador, let me open it up because the list has now gone frightfully long. So I'll get a few people in now so that we open it up a bit. And I might ask a first group of 4 or so to make their interventions. Come back to you, and then we'll take a second group of 4. So first one from Turkey, Sinem Cengiz.
Thank you, Bastian. Ambassador Barak, there is a clear positive momentum in Turkey-U.S. relations, and your role as an ambassador to Ankara has been very significant in fostering this progress. However, there are still serious differences between Ankara and Washington when it comes to Syria in regards to threats against Turkey's national interests coming from specific actors, either SDF or even Israel. In your capacity as the special envoy to Syria, how do you assess the prospects for narrowing the divergences between 2 NATO allies and identifying ways for potential convergences?
Thank you very much. We're keeping track of the questions. I'll get a few more in from Egypt and the Young Leaders Group, Sarah El Menawi.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. My question is about long-term stability framework for the Levant. In recent events, Israel has justified repeated cross-border attacks in Syria, framed as protection of the Druze communities over there. However, these operations not only undermine territorial integrity, but also state sovereignty in Syria, and of course impacting long-term stability in the Levant. From your perspective as a special envoy for Syria, and also for the U.S. holding a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, how do you think the U.S. should balance the protection of vulnerable communities while preserving state sovereignty? And most importantly, how to ensure that accountability is upheld so that such interventions do not become normalized tools for regional management? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the United States, Raghida Dargam.
Yes, Ambassador Barak, Raghida Dargam of Beirut Institute. I appreciate your frankness about Lebanon, and I share many of your views, but I don't think this is very helpful to dress down the country like you do all the time. When you say, Ambassador Barak, that you want to help the army and the country, the situation of chaos in Lebanon would not even help your plans for Syria. It might even hurt it. The army is doing its best, and the United States claims and says and declares that it supports the army. Why can't you invest in Lebanon in goodwill, just like you invest in Syria? I know you mean well, but I think your message has been quite harmful. Forgive me for my honesty.
Thank you. Let's take one more from the United Kingdom and from Reuters, Alexander Cornwell.
Hi, Alexander Cornwell from Reuters, to your left. Ambassador, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel appears to be adamant that Turkey will have no role in Gaza in the day after he's ruled out Turkish forces. What role do you see Turkey playing realistically in Gaza, and can the United convince Israel to allow Turkey to play that role? Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go back and we'll take that group of 4 questions. So the divergence or convergence vis-a-vis Syria.
I
got it? Yeah.
I've got that.
Okay.
Well, I'll start with the last one. So let's just get factual. The ceasefire in Gaza would not have happened without Turkey. President Trump acknowledged President Erdogan on the stage 4 times. President Erdogan, in the last minute, there were 2 holdouts. Sheikh Mohammed and Qatar had done an amazing job. Everybody had pushed as hard as they could. It was actually Turkey's relationship with Hamas, not declaring them a foreign terrorist organization, that allowed him to push the last 2 over the hump to get to a ceasefire. So the fact that Israel rightly is concerned with Turkey's involvement in a secondary force is because at this moment the rhetoric between both President Erdogan and Netanyahu is that Netanyahu wants a greater Israel. He's going to take over everything down to Turkey, and that Turkey wants the Ottoman Empire back. It wants to take over Israel. Neither is true. So for the moment, I think everything stands still. Turkey will be a participant. I think to the very good question on Lebanon, and look, it's a very difficult issue. So I come back with just facts. You've had UNIFIL for 40 years, $11.7 billion in a peacekeeping force. You've had abject chaos and war for 40 years. You've had 4 failed governments. You lived without a president for 2.5 years. You've had 4 prime ministers executed, and you've had 6 wars in the time that anybody can remember. So I'm not sure what the state is. Lebanon is the beautiful people that live outside of the boundary, and the geography of Lebanon is quite confused. So it's really up to the Lebanese. It's not up to America. America has no skin in this game. America's point of view, this president says, I'm all for counterterrorism. Who's a terrorist? Hezbollah. You have 27 Shia ministers. You have in the parliament. It's a paralyzed government, governed by the foreign terrorist organization who has death to America, death to Israel. So your heart is with the Lebanese people. My heart is with the Lebanese people, and my message is really simple. America is not going to get deeper involved in a situation in which you have a foreign terrorist organization and a failed state dictating a pace and asking them for more resources, more money, more help. It's simple. Lebanon can do what it wants to do. The path is very clear that it needs to be to Jerusalem or Tel Aviv for a conversation, along with Syria. Syria is showing the way. Syria will get there first. Lebanon can draft in it or not. And Israel will react to them accordingly. We have nothing to do with it. Going to the next question on Turkey, Syria, and Israel. Turkey was responsible for al-Shara on December 8th really being able to take over. And the relationship between Turkey and Syria is very conducive. The 3.5 million Syrians that speak both Arabic and Turkish are looking for opportunities across that border. Both Turkey and Saudi now are playing well with each other in the sandbox, saying we need to have this tapestry of Syria work. Are we all hopeful that the al-Shara regime is it? And by the way, I think it is. You're going to see Assad Shabani, the foreign minister here. They've done an amazing job. In 11 months, Secretary Rubio gave them 8 criteria of what he wanted to look back in state-sponsored terrorism, things you're all concerned with. What are you going to do with the foreign fighters? What do you do with the ISIS prison camps? You have 20,000 displaced people that need to go back, Iraq, Syria, Europe. What are you going to do with chemical weapons? You had some nuclear refuge that needs to be taken care of. Are you going to have inclusion with the Druze, with the 5 Christian communities, with the Kurds? The Kurds, the PKK is the issue in Turkey. 40,000 people lost. SDF as a calibrate of that. The discussions with SDF and onboarding are going amazingly well. Assad Shabani will talk to you about it tomorrow. We're very close to having an alignment. They signed a deal on March 10th. They've gone back to the March 10th deal. There is no congestion between Syria and Turkey. My bet, by the way, with Turkey and Israel is if we hold together, if the momentum holds together, if Jared and Steve and the great teams keep this moving in Gaza, that in not too long of a time you will see a trade deal between Turkey and Israel. Look what's happening above. You have Azerbaijan and Armenia. This is Lebanon revisited. Lebanon is the only one who's not jumping in line. Do you think Armenia and Azerbaijan didn't have the same feelings that we all had on poor Lebanon, poor Armenia? Move to the momentum. This president has changed the entire chessboard. It's happening everywhere. Turkey and Israel will not be at war with each other. In my opinion, it's not going to happen. And you're going to get alignment from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean. And what could happen to this region? Saudi Arabia, look at it, Vision 2030. Who ever imagined it could happen? You take this young prince and turn it on its dime, you can't imagine what's happened. You go to 35 million people. I started in life there as a lawyer. I'm still a recovering lawyer. And I would never imagine, if somebody would have told me that I could see on the streets of Riyadh what I see in women's rights and entertainment and resorts and just the thought process of education. It's happening everywhere. We're catching up, but we need to catch up quickly.
Let me get a few more. We've got, just to let you know, I've got over 20 on the list. We won't get there because we have 13 minutes left, but we'll get a few more in. And I'll take another group of 4 or so. And we'll start with the UAE, Aya Iskandarani.
Hello, this is Aya Iskandarani from AFP. I have a question both about Lebanon and Syria. So about Syria, you mentioned that they're going to get to a deal with Israel. How soon do you think this kind of deal will happen? And is it going to be a purely security deal or go all the way to normalization, as you were saying? And about Lebanon, you were saying Israel is not happy. They might do something. The US is not going to stand in the way. So if the deadline comes by the end of the year and Israel launches a full-blown strike, first of all, is this something that you think will happen? And what would the US do if it does?
Thank you very much. From Bahrain and the Young Leaders Group, Nauf Al-Awadi.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time. So throughout history, there have been regime changes, mainly in the Middle East, and mainly in Middle Eastern countries, either through a coup or through the involvement of external intervention. Now, what are the conditions of a state? You have sovereignty, self-determination, land, and population. And some of the regimes that originally started, they worked for the country itself, they worked for the population. And then, because of the involvement from external state actors, the country becomes worse off than it was. So rather than thriving. So throughout the past 100 years or so, we've had economies changed, we've had policy changes, and we've had leaders change as well in terms of ideology. So what are the lessons learned when it comes to involvement in the Levant and the Middle East region? And would you say that external state actor intervention impacts the level of conflict in the region? And in addition to my question is the second question.
Briefly, please.
Sorry. With the different U.S. administrations, we've seen that some lean more towards getting involved in conflict in terms of supporting some parties, and other administrations that prefer peace building and non-intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take Abigail Hauslohner from the U.S. and the Financial Times.
Thank you. Ambassador, I appreciate your optimism about the progression of the President's peace plan. I think every government represented in this room has told you over the course of recent days and weeks that a two-state solution or Palestinian statehood needs to be part of the plan, the goal, if the president's peace plan is to succeed in the long term. Is the Trump administration listening to these partners? And if so, is the U.S. going to do that? If not, please explain the administration's thinking as to how you believe this long-lasting peace can be achieved without that, without what your regional partners are telling you.
Thank you very much. Let me take one more, and then I'll return to the ambassador, Aliyah Mubayed from the UK. Aliyah.
Yes, thank you very much. Ambassador, I want to ask you about your economic prosperity agenda for the Levant. I mean, we've seen over the last decades that top-down approach to peace and normalization have not, unfortunately, necessarily delivered on the prosperity agenda, whether in Egypt, in Jordan, or other part of the region. Can you please explain to us how the new approach of the administration, and in particular in the Levant, a region where at least needs $100 billion of reconstruction needs, can this yet another top-down approach to normalization deliver on prosperity?
Thank you very much. Ambassador.
So there's a lot to unpack. So let's talk about what would America do if Israel becomes more aggressive to Lebanon? That's not for me to answer. It's for nobody to answer because it's a factual situation that nobody understands. But I can tell you the president's commitment has been no boots on the ground. We're not getting involved in regional disputes. We got involved with Israel and Iran. We have a stated enemy. We've said innumerable times the region has to take care of itself. So we will be there to support our allies. But this is part of the equation that I'm trying to get all of us to think about, to urge and usher Lebanon. It's clear that Israel has become a dominant ally in this repositioning of the chessboard of what happens in the Middle East. And the Abraham Accords, at least for what we have in front of us, seems to be the road that everybody needs to jump on. Not Islam against Judaism, not Judaism against Christianity, a combined prosperity of saying it's not from the top down going to what happens to the economy, it's from the bottom up. We're building a new hybrid, and that new hybrid has to come from that alignment. So if there's an aggression on the part of Israel, you saw what just happened with the aggression of Israel and Iran. So you make your own determination what happens if Israel becomes aggressive with someone else who is a foreign terrorist organization. It's a complex question. I'm not equipped to give you an answer, but it's not an easy decision.
So there's one question about the lessons from external involvement in the Levant and Middle East. Maybe we'll take that next.
Yeah, the lessons learned. It's what I started at the beginning. The lessons learned are do not go there, right? Since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, everything that the West has done has been a mistake. Taking the colonial mandate and placing it on tribes and flags in religious context has never worked. It just has never worked. So all those centralized models have failed. What's worked is benevolent monarchies. They have worked. So look around our region, look around our zip code, and those have worked. Why? Alignment of religious interests, alignment of political interests, a benevolent and understanding government that doesn't need to be corrupt because it's allocating resources. Many of these are the fossil fuel beneficiaries. So this president has gone to lessons learned and said since 1919, since the Paris Treaty and on, and the San Remo Treaty, and the Oslo Treaty, every treaty that has imposed these Western standards has not worked. So what we're trying to do is just usher the availability to the region and say, let's try something new. You have all the power. You have all the money, energy, AI. Look at what's happening with chips. Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, trading the idea of prosperity from just pumping oil to prosperity by creating portfolios of the next regime. A place like Bahrain can benefit from it. It has a definable and understandable legal system. It has an educated working class. A foreigner can own property on any basis. It has understandable work laws. It has no digital tax. These are the things that now can come to bear everywhere.
Can I ask you to perhaps also engage on the point, on the question that was asked? Are you heeding partners' calls for a two-state solution? If not, what are the alternatives in your plan here?
Yeah. So, look, it's a complicated question. I think everybody's right? Everybody's running saying, just stop this. Stop the senseless killing. However we get there, just stop the senseless killing. So I look at a tremendous victory just getting the hostages back. The day-to-day, we all know, you kill one terrorist, you create 7 others. You kill a father, you have 3 sons, 2 daughters, and a wife who now, for 100 years, have an issue and a problem. Whether now the Palestinians become Israelis and it becomes one state, or there's some hybrid form of what that is, will have to evolve. It's not the issue at the moment. The issue at the moment is time out, stop the killing, get humanitarian care in, start defining what could the essence of a de-escalation and peace plan be, and flood it with momentum. So I think what you're going to see in Jared and Steve's plan as to what's coming, which the world is stepping in, the Gulf is helping us, is you could have a resurgence in which that definition of, is it Palestinian Authority, is it Hamas, is it Hezbollah, is it some other definition of Palestinians living in an Israeli environment, could evaporate as you start marrying interests. And that's the hope. And whether it's two-state or one state is yet to be determined.
Let me take 3 really quick questions and then concluding thoughts from the ambassador. From the UAE, Khalifa Al-Suwaidi.
Thank you, Bastian. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time. There seems to be this unwavering conviction that regional peace equates to having diplomatic relations with Israel. Is this how the current admin sees things? I'm curious because it comes across as being the sole metric with which regional peace is measured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the Young Leaders Group and from Egypt, Sameh Mansour.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I have a very direct point. I would like to ask, what is Washington's long-term vision for Syria? Is there a defined political or strategic end state the U.S. is working toward? Or has the approach become one of managing instability indefinitely? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Not going to get an easy answer there, I think, but one more, Ross DeSibyl from the UK. Ross.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Barak. Just widening the aperture, do you think Turkey has anything to teach NATO's Central European members about handling Russian air incursions?
Thank you very much. So 3 very different questions. Sole metric for regional peace, the establishment of diplomatic relations with Israel, long-term vision for Syria, and air incursions.
And that last question is going to give me a 3 Tylenol headache, but let's go to is alignment with Israel necessity? The answer is no. I think our position, our recommendation is those countries who boundary and border with Israel need to come to a border resolution. Israel has been very clear after October 7th, anything that threatens that border, they're not going to pay attention to the blue line, the green line, or the red line. They want normalization, they want a treaty and boundary agreement, and they will enforce it in their own right. For instance, looking at Lebanon, we have this, the Biden administration created the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement, November 24th of 2024. And by the way, the agreement was with nobody. Lebanon didn't agree with Israel. Israel didn't agree with Hezbollah because they can't talk to each other. So we created these mechanisms, United Nations mechanisms in between so that the agreements could be amongst us. They were violated in an afternoon. The discussion of Syria, of Lebanon. The Sinai Agreement is the only agreement that's ever worked, by the way, because it cost $3 billion. It was a time where Henry Kissinger was Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. By the way, Marco Rubio, who is the best Secretary of State, in my humble opinion, that we've ever had, is also the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State, which is why I keep saying You have a moment, all of you have a moment in this administration with them to get whatever needs to be done, and it doesn't have to be Abu Dhabi agreeing to a treaty agreement with Israel. If Abu Dhabi decides that it's beneficial to join the Abraham Accords, it can do so, not a necessity certainly for our administration. The advice is, if you're on the boundary or border of Israel, and you're one of those countries, the first step, rather than thinking that you're going to fight them at the moment, is to align with them.
Future vision for Syria?
Future vision of Syria is there is no plan B. I think you have the smartest people in this room. We can all sit and say, okay, can you rely on the al-Shar regime to go the distance? They've been in it 10 months. They've had the sanctions not taken off. So the fuel, they went from 750,000 barrels a day in Deir ez-Zor in the northeast to 65,000 barrels. They're selling at $20 a barrel, carrying it out. How do you turn the lights on? People on the street have maybe 4 hours a day of electricity, 3 days a week of water. Diaspora cannot come back yet. We don't have a banking system. We don't have a central bank. We don't have a correspondent banking system. It's hawalas, right? So the hawalas, you can trade gold bullion on the street, but you can't get a dollar through a bank. That's all just about to change. So our goal is that make Syria the tapestry in the middle of a common resource. The Syrian people are amazing, and they're amazing at things that the other Gulf countries don't want to do. So with Gulf influence, with Turkey helping on that side, with Saudi supporting it on this side, with a peace agreement with Israel, you bolster Iran. To the extent that the Iranian regime, the IRGC, is a problem for everybody, not the Iranian people. But when you have Iran and the Houthis and Hezbollah saying, death to Israel, death to America, you cannot expect this administration to weigh in at anything other than say, we are going to weigh in against counterterrorism, and Syria is the place to do that in spades. They're about to sign the IISS coalition letter. I think Foreign Minister Shabani may talk about it tomorrow, which is a huge step. Join 88 other countries in a IISS coalition. For Syria to do this after the Assad regime is remarkable, and it's really due to President Trump and the regional support of Saudi Arabia, Turkey, even Israel pointing to it, and everybody saying, we'll usher you along, we'll help you get there. We understand there's going to be speed bumps.
Ambassador Barak, thank you so much for the frank conversation, for engaging with the 12 or 13 questions that we got to. Next time we'll add a bit more time and we get another 10 in, but thank you very much for joining us here today. It was a pleasure to have you. I think people appreciate the engagement. We now have we'll leave Russian air incursions for the coffee break, which is about to start now. We then have at 5 o'clock a special session on security sector reform in Syria, where a theme that the IISS has just done some work on. So join that session as well. And now have a good coffee break. And may I ask for one more round of applause for Ambassador Barak. Thank you very much.